here we are on what is going to be another mind-bending episode of the show. The plan this year in 2022, well, it's my mission to coach 300 people to get control of their emotional eating so they can lose weight and actually keep it off without counting calories or eating rabbit food. As many of you know, or maybe you're finding out for the first time, my own journey into nutrition really began when I had multiple epiphanies working in a cancer hospital. Two of those being, no one ever talks about the cause of disease, and if the World Health Organization say diet and lifestyle are the two biggest players in cancer, why are doctors not trained in nutrition and lifestyle medicine? This is what began opening Pandora's box for me of the truth about, well, pharmaceutical companies and alternative medicine. And along the research rabbit hole, I came across the book called The Metabolic Approach to Cancer, of which today's guest is one of the co-authors. And we actually had the other co-author on episode 95, if you want to check that out after this episode. So I'd like to introduce you to one of the world's most impressive nutritionists, Jess Higgins Kelley. As well as a nutritionist, she's also a journalist and an educator. She has been a private practice oncology nutrition consultant since 2010 and has extensive experience working with cancer and chronic illness clients worldwide via her consulting company, Remission Nutrition. She's the co-author of two books, The Metabolic Approach to Cancer, Integrating Deep Nutrition, the Ketogenic Diet, and Non-Toxic Bio-Individualized Therapies, and the second, Bioregulatory Medicine, an Innovative Holistic Approach to Self-Healing. If that's not impressive enough for you, this amazing woman actually set out to solve one of the confusing epiphanies that I had when I worked in the hospital and is the founder and director of the Oncology Nutrition Institute, which provides online certification programs for qualified health practitioners like doctors, nutritionists, PhDs, nurses, and trains them in the emerging field of modern and integrative metabolic oncology nutrition therapy. And she was kind enough to have me on recently as a guest speaker at the Institute, which I'm super grateful for, and it was such an honor. And when she's not being an international superstar, Jess actually does normal human things like trail running, skiing, surfing, sailing, yoga, getting her hands dirty in her own organic garden, and spending time with the fam. A big warm welcome, Jess. How you doing?
Hey, virtual high five. Great. Thank you for such a fun introduction. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. I'm excited to have you here. Now, we were talking beforehand via email that you're trying to get some of the warmth from here because you're basically iced in where you are, right?
Yeah, we're iced in here in New England in the middle of January. And, you know, my new mission in the field of nutrition is really trying to grow a lot of my own food here. And so it's sort of a sad little time in the garden, but it's also great because I've filled my house with sprouts in the windowsills and I have lemon trees growing and, trying to bring a little bit of that inside. So, yeah, but I was excited to talk to you and hear just a little ray of sunshine coming from down under.
Well, hopefully we can transfer some warmth. It's because it's about 34 degrees here. So I think that's about 93 Fahrenheit.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Yeah. Actually, speaking of things in the windowsill, I have an avocado seed that is absolutely killing it, and I live in an apartment in the windowsill.
I love that. One of our things that we try to get all of our clients to do is just at least grow some sprouts in the windowsill. It's so easy, and broccoli sprouts are so nutrient dense, and it just kind of gets you that little connection to growing your own food. It's so fun to watch. I mean, it's therapeutic in its own to watch a little plant start to show up,
and in the context of the cancer stuff, like broccoli sprouts and sulforaphane is like ideal.
Totally. Yeah, it's one of the easiest things that you can do to grow your own food at home and have like a nutrient dense jar of these yummy little sprouts to just chuck on to your dishes and, know you're getting some nutrient density. So it's fun. The indoor gardening thing is cool this time of year. And I definitely have gone kind of wild. I've got olive trees and hibiscus and tulsi and all sorts of, my oregano came inside, so it's fun to bring some of those things in and just be able to nibble on them throughout the winter. So
you've got a bit of an indoor sanctuary.
Yeah, sort of creating a little bit of like a sun feel so you can sit by the window, by the plants and transport.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. So we were chatting before via email when we were figuring out what to do. And I remember the first time we caught up on a call, you talked a little bit about your journey and you started in journalism. And I'm just
Yeah.
really curious to learn about that journey, because I think in the world of health, and we're learning a lot about this on summits and events and stuff like that now, but journalists, investigative journalists, are really the unsung heroes of the health world and the evolutions that the health world goes through. So, you went from journalist all the way through to running an institute to educate doctors on
Yeah.
nutrition. Can you give us a bit of that journey?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it just really starts with just having an unsatiable desire to learn. And that's really what pulled me to journalism in the first place, is just sort of telling stories and meeting people and learning what makes them tick and learning about different concepts and what people are doing, so that, you learn how to present the facts. I've been a writer since I was like little. I've always loved writing, and journalism was great because it was, we've sort of lost this a bit now, but, we're taught present the facts. So I really just think of myself as just a conduit of, distilling the news of the world into a bouillon cube, for the masses to digest. And so, yeah, I went to journalism school in Colorado and focused on community journalism and sort of, different current events and that type of thing. And I worked for newspapers in Alaska and Idaho and all over the place, and did sort of just current events, what's happening in the local towns, small towns I lived in. And then, it pulled me into marketing in the outdoor world, and I worked for ski companies and did public relations and all that. And then, the fusion of like being healthy and being outdoors and working for outdoor sports companies, ski areas and stuff. A big missing piece is, you'd see these athletes who are incredible and then they eat garbage. And I'm like, wow, think of how, it just seemed like a disconnect. So I've always been interested in nutrition and, the power of nature and plants and bioactive components. And so I was lucky enough to go to nutrition school years later, and really get the understanding. Like, I can't write about it unless I really understand it. So I wanted to know the research, know the background, to just really feel that I could write with authority about it. So now it's kind of the best of both worlds, of writing about food and nutrition and farming trends and diet trends and all that, and just sort of researching and learning, ever learning. So yeah, it brought
Yeah.
me to doing 2 books and writing different magazine articles and having a private practice for nutrition for a long time. And now we're training other doctors, because it's hard to, just do the one-on-one all the time. It's like there's such important messages to get out there. So it's nice to train others, so I don't have to do all the
Yeah.
talking.
Yeah, no, totally. That makes perfect sense. And I guess as well, when dealing with such chronic patients, energetically, it can be really consuming.
Yeah, it really can. It can. And I lost my dad to cancer. I had been practicing like sort of family practice nutrition and sort of starting to go more into oncology when my dad got diagnosed with glioblastoma
Hmm.
multiforme, which is that stage 4 really advanced, like the cancer you don't want to get, because if you leave it untreated, it's, 3 months. And so that really just was an eye opener to be on the other side, sort of on the, when you're working with folks, you're like, yeah,
Hmm.
just make some bone broth and do some broccoli. And they're like, wow, gosh, do you know how bad I feel? You know how hard this is. And so it was really insightful to be on the other side and see what it was like for the patient journey, and
Hmm.
going to scans and sitting in the hospital and having people come around with trays of cookies at 6 o'clock in the morning. And it's like, huh? What? Why? What? That makes no sense. Like, why aren't hospitals, feeding people super nutritious food? Like, why is this being left
Yes.
off the menu? It makes no sense to me. So that really kind of fueled up a little bit more passion to kind of try to get, metabolic nutrition into part of the standard of care for people who have cancer, because this is such a key piece, and it's something that's non-toxic and non-invasive. And why are we getting milkshakes when we should be getting like therapeutic smoothies? So yeah.
I'm so with you. I remember when I was working at the cancer hospital, it got to the point where I was so deep down the rabbit hole outside of the hospital in like the nutrition world and the kind of, the understanding the chemo movement and blah, blah, blah. That the dietitians were just on the ward would just like run away when they saw me coming because I was just became relentless. And they'd be like, oh,
Mhm.
here's this guy that thinks he knows about nutrition.
Right.
And it's like, all that matters is microalbumin levels. So, more protein powder and energy, calories. That's it. That's all that matters.
Right. Right, right. It was just, the prevailing thing over the years. We've worked with clients and they're like, well, I asked my doctor what I should eat. And they say, it doesn't matter what you eat, just don't lose weight. And I can't tell you how many hundreds of times we've heard that. We have to just keep speaking to that. It's like, if your doctor doesn't know this information, it's time to find a new doctor who actually recognizes the therapeutic potential of metabolic oncology nutrition, because it's a game changer. Like, we've seen
Hmm.
it help so many people, from the quality of life to quantity of life. It just seems that it's strange that it's left off the menu, and what we're getting told is like these meal replacement drinks that are just high fructose corn syrup and soybean oil. It's like, I don't know, but last time I checked, that wasn't on the list of like superfoods.
Yeah,
So
more. It's like death juice, basically.
yeah, yeah, that's a perfect way to say it. Yeah, exactly. Can of death
so,
juice.
so we want to talk about like. There's so many things that I want to talk to you
I
about.
know. Yeah.
Like we could just go forever, I think. But I really loved that when we spoke last, you were talking about how the sort of the nutrition issue is the whole supply chain wide, basically, and it goes all the way down to the plants in the ground on the farm. So even the processed foods that we end up with on the other end that might be labeled as natural or organic or insert buzzword for marketing actually are not that great because of the farming that they experience and the soils that they experience. What got you super passionate about that end of the food chain?
Yeah, it's been really fun. After I've been practicing nutrition for over 12 years, and there's so many different magnets that you're like, wow, this is super fascinating, and I need to go that way, and I need to dive down that rabbit hole and research this. And I felt like I was either getting pulled towards like the clinical, like what's
Hmm.
happening in the science, what's happening in the lab, like what are they finding out about resveratrol and its anti-cancer effects. But then this other magnet was like, hey, how can I talk to people about food if we don't talk about food quality, like where the food is coming? So it's like,
Hmm.
we have the supply chain to health, which talks, it starts with nutrient dense soil. Nutrient dense soil produces higher nutrient content produce,
Hmm.
and then that elevates your nutrition status and keeps you going along on a health trajectory. Or there's the supply chain to disease, which is, these nutrient depleted soils being treated with chemical synthetic fertilizers and nutrient additives, and really lacking in the mycelial, the microbes that we really need to improve health. And so if you're, what I'm really excited about, what they're doing at the Bionutrient Association and Dan Kittredge and these bionutrient meters is so cool, where they're testing the nutrient content of, let's say a carrot grown on a conventional farm versus in a regenerative agriculture farm. The difference in nutrients is huge. 40 times more nutrient content coming out of these vegetables that are grown in organic, great poop compost. And so I was like, okay, well, how can I talk to people about it unless I can do it myself, right? So
For sure.
part of nutrition starts with self-reliance and growing your own food. And I think as people have become disconnected from their food source, that's really
Hmm.
changed their, mental health. I mean, you think
Hmm.
about it, for people who have been hunter gatherers and then early agri, most people had a backyard farm, up until
Yeah.
about 1900, and those numbers have plummeted, and so people don't even know what goes into their vegetable. It looks like a tomato, it kind of tastes like a tomato, but it's not the tomato of our ancestors. So I think that, with cancer prevention, what we're seeing now, because of the toxins that we're exposed to at such a young age, it's like we have to start preventing cancer the second you're born. So getting kids eating food that's grown in regenerative agriculture soils that are, rich and teeming with nutrients and microbes, you're just going to get, that's the foundation. It's like nutrition, I feel like, has to start on the farm, because if we
Mm.
don't have farms, if we don't have these small, amazing farmers that are doing things the way that they've been done for thousands of years, we're going to have these big industrial farms, and then we don't have food. So I
Mhm.
feel like it's a responsibility for everyone who works in the field of nutrition to talk about where your food is coming from, like looking a little closer at it, instead of just going to Whole Foods and being like, sweet apples from New Zealand. And it's like, well, there's no nutrients in there. So,
Totally. And they've been
yeah.
in the freezer for 12 months.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
They've been picked too soon. And so what we're seeing is that, you get these farmers with these farm stands, the second that you pick kale, we were talking about kale earlier. I've got my little weepy little kale from my garden.
Trying to survive the ice
Come
storm.
on, buddies, hang in there. you know, they start losing their nutrient content, within 3 days of being picked. So if you're
Mhm.
getting food that's been picked, weeks ahead of time before it was ripe, like tomatoes, and then you're just not getting that nutrient density. So I feel like it has
Mhm.
to start a lot sooner, people paying attention to this importance of farming. And nutritionists and farmers need to be like holding hands together, like walking through to send this message, because that's really where health starts, on the farm.
Totally. We actually had Regen Ray on episode 151, and he runs Farming Secrets here in Australia, and he's currently getting around the outback in Australia meeting farmers. He's a good friend of mine, and we talk about this stuff all the time. But one of the interesting things, and I mean, many people know, like, people are twice as likely to move away from pain than they are to pleasure. And I think, talking about the idea of like having a farm at home and these super nutrient dense amazingness is sort of the pleasure conversation. And so
Mhm.
I'd really love it if you could sort of highlight why massive monocrop commercial farming is a pain point for people that they should be aware about. Like, why can't they do that? Like, there's all these people living in the city that are like, I do this job for them, they do that job for me. Like, how do we get out of this sort of commercialized society in order to get back to that? Because there's obviously significant problems in this monocropping agricultural industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what we're seeing, as far as, industrial food, so it has more toxins, pesticides. Rates of childhood leukemia have increased almost 35% in the last 25 years. And a lot of it
Wow.
is linked to exposure to toxins. And here in the US, we have a really great group called the Environmental Working Group, and they, pick the dirty dozen every year. They test, the pesticide content in some of the most commonly consumed produce items. And, the soft skin, like tomatoes and lettuces and strawberries, I mean, they can have upwards of 40 different pesticide residues on them. And so the more that we monocrop, which is, it's a monocrop, mono diet, it's not how things exist in nature. So
Hmm.
it's, you don't walk through the forest and see just one perfect line of wheat. It's like everything entangles together. And what we lose a lot in nutrition, I think, is talking about the synergies between having, pairing things like lemon and green tea, and how it increases its bioavailability. Curcumin and pepper increases the bioavailability and the phytonutrients. And so
Hmm.
unfortunately, as we've become so industrialized, we have these farms that just mass produce a single crop. And because those soils aren't being taken care of in between, they just need to add more synthetic pesticides and more fertilizer. And that's not that's toxic. It's a xenobiotic. It completely destroys our microbiome. Here in the United States, we have a lot of use of glyphosate. So in that, as an herbicide pesticide, and we've been finding, of course, in the research of what it does to our gastrointestinal tracts, and why we're seeing such an increase of celiac disease and as Hippocrates said, all disease begins in the gut. So if we're
Hmm.
eating some of these pesticide laden foods, we're going to be just inoculating ourselves with toxins. And so I think where people also have lost that connection. So not only are we getting a lot of toxic exposure from these big agricultural industrial farms, but we also don't have a connection. So we're ingesting food, we're putting it into our body. And I think that this is where a lot of the food addiction comes from processed foods, is that, you know, when I cut my bushels of kale, it feels a lot different than when I go to the big grocery store and I get like a little limp,
Yeah.
bundle there, because I'm like, I watched it, and you kind of connect with it, and you start to, kind of harmonize with your plants and your food sources. And it, that energetically also is really good, I think, for the mind. And we're seeing so many people with just rates of depression and addiction. And I think that a big part of it comes from losing our connection to our food sources. I mean, not only
Hmm.
are they toxic for the environment and for us, but I think on an emotional level, we just have lost our connection to earth and to the plants and animals that sustain us. So,
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's funny because it's morning time here for me. It's like the start of the day, and one of the first things I do is I go for a walk barefoot
uh,
on the grass and stuff
yeah.
like that every single day. And it's with like, and I don't turn my phone on until midday. That's pretty
Mm-hmm.
much a daily
Oh,
thing, so
yeah.
that I can just be like present with essentially nature and just that reconnection to the land. And I guess as well, even though I am in a city, I'm doing it as best as I can. It reminds me, as you were talking there, about nutrient density in plants that are grown on regenerative farms versus conventional farms, that a lot of people in this sort of commercialized world think, but I can just buy supplements, right? Like, can't I just supplement my way out of this? And can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. We
I
see
can
this.
see the expression on your face, like, what? Hold on, everyone.
Yeah, hold the phone on that one. So I can't tell you the numbers of clients that have, walked through our doors that are on supplement lists that are 3 pages long. I'm not even kidding you. And
Hmm.
it's like, and we're like, okay, well, what are you eating? Send us your supplement list, but then like send us a diet log, because that's kind of more important. And it's like, oh, no, 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 no. It's the pill mentality. Like, oh, I'll just
Hmm.
pop a pill so I don't have to eat a Brussels sprout or whatever. And in nutrition, as you know, we say it's not what you eat, it's what you digest. And because so many people have, rates of digestive disorders are through the roof. I mean, it's become normalized to see pictures of people with, colostomy bags, young people. This
Yeah.
is really common. And it's like, oh, cool. Well, yeah, let's just accept it. No, this is not okay. Like, that is not cool that young people are like not digesting what is going on. So, until people repair their whole digestive tract,
Hmm.
why bother taking supplements? How do we even know that they're actually being absorbed, that they're a bioavailable form? And then most people don't test to look at the saturation in blood levels to see,
Hmm.
like, okay, cool. Well, are we testing? I think a big thing that we're trying to change the conversation around is testing micronutrient levels. It's like, why are we not testing vitamin C in our cancer patients? Why don't we know how much vitamin C is in
Yeah.
their body? Why aren't we testing why aren't we testing magnesium? Why aren't we looking to see? But then we'll just, it's like a, buckshot. It's just like, let's just supplement everything and think
Hmm.
that that will work. And it's like, that's not the point. I mean, we really have to we always trying to bring people back to like, it's food first. You've got to get your microbiome, repopulated. And people, of course, that have been through certain chemotherapies, they have a lot of damage to their gut. And then to just think that you can dump on a bunch of supplements and get out of it, not necessarily if you're not absorbing it. It's very expensive poop if you are not absorbing those supplements. It's like, no, 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 let's wait, and not to everyone's trying their best as practitioners, but we're seeing sort of a trend in naturopaths of sort of just being like green allopaths. It's just like, well, instead of
Hmm.
prescribing drugs, they're just prescribing a bunch of supplements, and it might be, resveratrol or indole 3 carbinol, but it's still a pill. So why not
Yeah.
get it? It's just an allopathic approach with green medicine. And so I think that that's a really important point for, when people are starting out on their regenerative journey. Someone has a chronic illness, it's like, don't start putting yourself on all these pills. Like, start by, planting a seed in your yard and doing some things to repair your gastrointestinal tract. It's like that, I think, is the first place to really start to cultivate health, is just coming back. It's like, I tell everyone, go outside, eat a little dirt, get your hands in the soil, pick some stuff from a garden, whether it's
Hmm.
you go to a local farm and you get a CSA or whatever, just to try to get that soil connection, back into your body. It's supplements. There's a time and a place for sure, but I don't think it's the right place to start all the time.
Yeah, I totally agree. And then, I mean, we can go into the conversation as well about brand quality, supplement quality. And
Yeah,
there's plenty of supplements that, obviously don't have the same package of supporting micronutrients around, the one that they're featuring in this particular supplement,
right.
which obviously Food from Nature has all of the bits and pieces to support the absorption and
Yes,
assimilation of
right.
those micronutrients. But in addition to that, like a lot of the times, they're synthetic analogs, which don't
Yes,
quite fit the receptor sites in the same way that food will.
yes, absolutely. And then the problem is the fallout is that we see it in research. So it's like, oh, folic acid not good for cancer, and people are like, oh my gosh, I shouldn't take B vitamins, I shouldn't eat meat. And it's like, wait, folic acid is synthetic, folate is the natural source. So you're
Yep.
taking a supplement that's a synthetic form of a nutrient that's been isolated, instead of eating, some a piece of meat that's from a grass-fed, pasture raised, pasture finished
Hmm.
cow. Very different sources of B vitamins. Folate content in dark leafy greens, very different than a synthetic folic acid supplement. So it's, I think that that's where it gets frustrating in the world of nutrition, is just these blanket statements. We get people, oh, I read a study, meat's bad for cancer. And it's like, okay, so can we differentiate between, were they grass fed, were they grass finished, or were they
Hmm.
CAFO cows? Or, oh, we read that, certain forms of synthetic beta carotene not good for lung cancer. Well, yeah, the studies were done using a synthetic form of that nutrient. So,
Hmm.
and then it's unfortunate, as the journalist in me, I'm like, wait, did you read the study? Did you see how it was put together? Like, let's,
Yep.
because mainstream media just blasted out, like, be scared of nutrition. It's like, no, you got to look a little deeper and kind of break it down a little bit more. And that's where I think it's important that there's more, journalists looking at, how nutrition information gets broadcast to the public, because people get afraid of food. Like someone the other day was like, flax is bad. I'm like, we don't need to worry about flax is bad. Like, let's
Yeah.
let's focus on, like, the ultra processed foods that have things that don't exist in our environment. Let's focus over there. So
Let's do that. Let's focus there. So ultra processed food and like how they affect farmers and how they're affecting the whole supply chain, basically, which obviously ends up with this sick population that we've got.
yeah, it goes along with the whole industrialized food movement. So,
Hmm.
on the shelf, when and the study that came out in August is that 70% of Americans get their diet, the majority of their diet, from ultra processed foods. So
Hmm.
this is there. It's not even really food, and it's built in a lab. So
Yeah.
humans have never eaten synthetic. We're biological living human beings, and these ultra processed foods have no bioactive components. They're caloric, and they've been, additives and sugars to make us addicted to them. They're just
Hmm.
drugs. And there's a move towards pharmaceutical foods, which is quite
That's
petrifying.
terrifying.
Yes, it's
Yes.
terrifying. Yes, it's
Oh my
terrifying.
God.
Yeah, so keep your eye on what's happening there, of modifying different vegetables to contain vaccines, medical.
Oh wow.
Yes, so that is something that's being discussed and being tested in the lab. So I think what it comes down to, at least in kids, it's like we're starting to see cancer. It's such a younger population. I've been talking to a couple colleagues in the last few weeks, and everyone's like, have you seen more kids come through the door? And it's like, yeah, this is not like, okay, this is not just reserved for old people anymore. We're seeing so many more cases of pediatric cancers come in. And, if they're eating, I mean, I feel like nutrition's really simple. You need food and water to stay,
Hmm.
to stay alive. If you just eat food the way that it was grown in nature, it doesn't need to be that confusing. But when
Hmm.
you see these kids and they're eating stuff in packages with crazy colors, and you read the label and you're like, there's not a single thing in there that occurs in nature. So you're feeding your body this fuel that it doesn't recognize, and that, creates altered signaling and inflammation and immune deficiencies, and so we're not getting nutrients from these industrial processed foods. We're getting just synthetic food. It's not even food. It's
Yeah, it's just energy.
it's just calories. Exactly. It's just calories. But, as we know, that calories, not just a calorie. So,
Yes.
but that's sort of that old diet dogma that people have been, it's like, oh, you read your label, count, look at the calories and look at the
Hmm.
fat content. And it's like, no, no, no. Okay. So we look at labels different now, like look at the ingredients, because
Hmm.
it's not, can you recognize it? Do you know how to pronounce it? Can you grow it in your backyard? Can you fish it? Can you hunt it? Can is your neighbor a rancher with great healthy outdoor cows? I mean, you have to be able to look a little closer at these labels and, ask yourself, you are what you eat and what you digest. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's the label reading is big.
Well, and it's so indoctrinated, particularly for women, which is why at the start of the show I say I can help you get healthy without counting calories. Because
Yeah.
if we put real food in, but it's so many people are just conditioned from, and I'm always ranting against personal trainers, that are like calorie deficit, bro, that whole argument,
Yeah.
because it just perpetuates this psychological issue.
Yes.
And I think nutrition is simple, but because we're in this world, this hyperinflated world of dopamine addiction to social
Yeah.
media, to, Tinder, the ability to find sex on tap, you know what I mean? Like all of these dopamine events,
Yeah.
Netflix, Facebook, sugar, vegetable oil, insert thing, that when it comes to being like nutrition is simple in comparison to the dopamine experience you can have on your phone in a split second.
Yeah.
Nutrition's actually like, I've got to go there, I've got to prepare the food, and there's all of these steps. So whilst functionally it's simple, we're also dealing with the psychology of people that are highly dopamine addicted, and so
Yeah.
anything that takes more than 5 seconds is hard work.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And people are they want the fast. What's fast? Because we've taken on too much. And it's like
Hmm.
instead of just slowing down, and I think that it's like throw the calorie thing out the window. It's like getting
Yes.
women to just forget what you've ever learned about nutrition. Just forget it and just go back to eating what your grandparents ate, or what you can grow, what you can get within 100-mile radius that farmers have grown. And you're gonna, I mean, that's that's pretty simple. But I've so many of our clients, if they come in, they want the prepackaged, I get the delivered food program, and I'm going to do
Hmm.
this shake program, or I'm going to do this particular bar, and the calories are all counted out for me and I don't have to think about it. And I
Hmm.
think that where weight loss happens is actually you have to start thinking about it. You have to start
Yes.
thinking about your food source and the food quality first. And calories, who cares? I haven't counted a calorie. I'm like, what's the point? If you're hungry, eat. If you're not hungry, don't eat. But when you start to feed your body, a lot of us are hungry because we're nutrient depleted. So a long time ago, there was a really amazing research study where it was orphanage where this researcher put out tons of different types of foods and let the kids pick and choose which they wanted to eat, and they could have as much or as little. And there
Hmm.
was one kid who had rickets and literally drank cod liver oil. Like, your body craves what you're depleted in. And when we're depleted in nutrients, it
Hmm.
creates this hunger sensation. And nutrients are what are involved for creating serotonin, creating dopamine, creating all those neurotransmitters. So when we're depleted, we're trying to fill a hole that's, it can't be filled with food or social media or any of that. We need to fill it with our connection to the planet and to where our food comes from first. And when you create that emotional bond with your food source, that's where we see our clients make the biggest change. It's the ones who are
Right.
sending us the pictures of, like, check out my new garden, like, look what's growing in the backyard, or wow, I got my sprouts going in the windowsill. We're like, send us pictures. We want to see what you're doing, so that
Hmm.
you have that bond, that relationship to something that you're growing and tending and harvesting. And I know not everybody is going to be like, I want to have a green thumb and grow my own food, but there's an awesome here in the US, there's a few different websites that you can find. It connects you to the local farms in your state, and we go through with our clients, like, okay, you live in Massachusetts. Here's all the organic farms that are within your area. Like, go make friends with them, go hang out on their farm, go talk to them, sign up
Hmm.
for a CSA, and it's like, it's those emotional connections that I think flip the switch for food addiction for people. And we've seen it
Hmm.
a lot over the years of when people start bonding with their farmers and bonding with their food sources and get out of these grocery stores. I mean, Whole Foods, look, you walk in there and it's like cherries and grapes in the middle of winter, and it's just not right. It's just not.
Hmm.
I mean, I walk in those places and have like an instant panic attack. I'm like, this is not right. This is not how it should be. This is not food where food quality comes from. So I think the more people get in touch with, what goes into the whole process and develop sort of a spiritual connection, that we've seen the biggest change for our folks who are far down the path, turn around when they really start taking control and ownership and self-reliance over where their food comes from. So,
And the interesting thing too in this space, when you, I think it's so scientized, if you
yeah.
like like nutrition and medicine, and it's so technical, and you've got to have been to university for so long that when
Mm,
you end up moving into this space of like connection and energy and community, people kind of throw it out. They're like,
yeah.
oh, that sounds a bit woo woo and made up and
Totally.
fluffy, but that's how we exist before the last
Yeah.
150 years. That's primarily how we existed for all of humanity. And it's like it's crazy, and I think we're seeing this with COVID, but like it's crazy how quickly humanity forgets the past. We've
Yes.
been here for thousands of years.
Yes.
We've seen tyranny thousands of times. We've seen
Hmm.
sickness thousands of times, and there's so much knowledge in the human genome that has been forgotten.
Yes. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I feel like, looking at evolutionary medicine is a big spot where people need to start tuning in. Our clients are so quick to be like, well, look at my genetics and look at my labs, and let's get really focused on pathways with
Mhm.
cancer and what's going on here. And it's like, whoa, we need to take a step back and look, instead of going so deep down the rabbit hole of
Mhm.
pathways and all these different things that are happening on a cellular level, and look back and look at the evolution of medicine. I mean, nutrition has been a staple in traditional Chinese medicine, in Ayurvedic medicine. These are the oldest forms of medicine that have been around for thousands of years, and we're so quick to drop our look at evolution and what we've always eaten and what we've always done. And humans have never been more sick. So, but what's really changed is our food sourcing. I mean, that's been one of our biggest cultural changes, addition of toxins, but also changes to food sources. And yeah, it does sound totally wooey. And I like, it's like spiritual connection. Like, I totally get that. Like, I'm like, yeah, whatever. Clients are like, tell me about what supplement to take to block this. And I get that. But the reason I think we've gotten into this mess is
Mhm.
because we have lost that connection. We have lost that
Mhm.
connection to our food and our food sources, and we need to get back to that. I mean, with COVID, it's true. It's just like you were saying earlier, you're going to the grocery store and there's not a lot of meat, there's not a lot of veggies, not a lot on there. So it's like the healthiest foods are going to be the fastest to go. So if we don't have self-reliance through community farms or CSAs or these small farmers going out of business, then we don't have medicine. I mean, it is
Yeah.
our medicine of choice, right? So yeah, I think that and that emotional connection, because if you're depressed, there's a big correlation between mood and incidence of cancer. And so I feel like horticulture therapy is something that can really help people with the weight journey and the health journey. And
Oh, I totally agree. And it's like that old adage, laughter is the best medicine.
yeah.
And I think it's been a saying for so long. And actually, I met here in Melbourne the world's leading researcher in laughter yoga. And I met him at a business event, but
Yeah.
then ran into him at the cancer hospital. And he comes in and he does laughter yoga with people. He's kind of making the woo-woo sciencey so people can
Yeah.
consume it and so that it's
Right.
accepted. And
Right.
he invited me to one of his sessions, which was like, you got to leave humility at the door for this experience. But it's that same kind of thing. Is that, yeah, that laughter is, you could say, a spiritual experience, right? And
Yeah.
connection with other people in this, this dimension of hilarity, that
Yeah.
makes people feel good, right?
Right. Yeah, it emits biochemicals in your body that make you
Yeah.
feel good. We get so gooped up in nutrition, it's got to be like something to stress out about. It's like, no, no, it shouldn't be stressful. It should be fun. And like I said earlier, or who was I saying it to? I'm like, my motto these days is just, we're telling everyone to just watch funny movies and drink homemade lemonade with lemons that are, if you can grow your own lemons, which I do in my house, so nutrient dense, so good, and just laugh and have lemonade. It's like we gotta
For
just like,
sure.
yeah, stop taking ourselves so seriously. And I feel like, with that, there's so much guilt, people, at least with our population with cancer, they'll be like, oh, I've been eating bad for so long and I feel so guilty. It's like, get that shit out the door. Leave your guilt, check that at the doorway. Like, you can't go back. Don't feel
Hmm.
guilty. And if you do have like a treat day, what, all good. Just enjoy it, but don't beat yourself up. It's like we have all these
Yeah.
emotions around food, and if you fall off the wagon or you can't stick to it, or that you should somehow degrade yourself. It's like, no, it's okay. Like, we got to just, there's so much energy that comes from like how you perceive what you're eating. They did
Oh,
those studies
totally.
where they had people prepare food and they were like swearing and in bad mood and they were like being all negative, and then another group prepared the food and they were like doing it all loving and like played music in the background, and then they served it to two different groups, and there was a noticeable difference in the energy around how people felt when
Hmm.
they ate the food. So yeah, I'm totally going on the woo woo track here, but
Oh no, I love it because I can't wait until we can like prove that. Even though there's part of me that thinks
yeah,
we shouldn't prove it.
yeah,
You know what I mean? It's like we shouldn't take the magic out of that and make it clinical, if you know what I mean.
right,
But part of me also thinks the world is so clinically and sterile minded with
yeah.
modern medicine that we kind of need to do that to get them on board.
Right, right. And what happened to the ritual, around
Mm.
eating, where now people eat in front of the TV or they eat on the run or they eat in their car? It's, a big part of what we do when we work with clients is like create a little ritual. So we have everybody who's trying to develop a new relationship with food to eat out of a bowl with chopsticks, because then they slow down. Bowls like
Ah.
round, like mother's womby, kind of taking care of nurturing,
Hmm.
and just say a little something about your food, a little grat. That's what people did for a long time. A little,
Totally.
whatever religion you are, a little grace, little prayer, little whatever you want to say, and then just kind of call in like, oh yeah, this is awesome, I have food in front of me. Like, how about a little more ritual and gratitude? We were talking about gratitude earlier for food. We're lucky to
Well,
have it.
and that's a pretty common thing even nowadays with hunters, is that
Yeah,
like when they take a life in order to feed, the community or the family or whatever, there's usually a spiritual
yeah,
gratitude practice around that where they thank God or Gaia or Mother Earth or whatever the
yeah.
belief system is, but just to acknowledge that, to thank the earth or the universe for supplying this opportunity to eat.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And we see if the work of Temple Grandin, who designed pens for animal slaughter to be more humane. And she found that when they went through like kind of a more gentle pathway into where they were eventually slaughtered, they had less cortisol levels in their muscle meat. And
Mm.
so, the less stressed the animal is before it's killed can change the composition of cortisol. So if you're getting cortisol animals all the time,
Hmm.
then you're going to have, change in your steroid hormone composition. And so it's the same with, hunting and giving thanks. My husband's a hunter and got a lot of turkeys this season. And it was really cool to sort of do some thankful rituals around it. And then, knowing everything that goes into butchering a turkey and processing it and everything. There's a lot to it. I've said to people, if you're not willing to do the work and shoot an animal or kill it yourself, then don't eat it. But I'll tell you, if I when I have to go, I would like to go as a cow because I visited farms. I did a story a few years ago for Edible Magazine, and I went and visited a meat processing small plant, and it was like this cow's like awesome life in the pasture, eating grass, comes in a little into the little pen, and then boom in the back of the head, and I was like, wow. I mean, not a bad way to go. I mean, it's pretty
Yeah,
good for at the
sudden
end. None of this chronic degenerative illness stuff.
for 30 years.
I know, I know. No, so yeah, it's I think thinking around giving thanks and gratitude for the plant. I have a farmer girlfriend who is like at the end of the year, she's like, "Oh, my tomato plants, I can't bear to cut them out, of the garden." And you get
Hmm.
connected to some of these things, and that's a state. It's emotional nourishment, which I think is important in the conversation when we talk
Oh,
about
I
health.
completely agree. And it's again something that can't really be measured by modern medicine and therefore it's ignored.
Yeah, right. If it can't be validated in a double-blind placebo study, then
Yeah.
it's not real, even though it's been around for thousands of years. And I think that, we have to, there's so many things that it's like it has to be proven to be real. But it's like, well, can we just go back? I mean, transport
Hmm.
back in time to what we were doing before everything got industrialized and changed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Well, where can everybody find you online? Like, I know people are listening and like, this is amazing. This is melting my brain. So, where can they connect with you and find your stuff and the Institute?
Yeah. So we are oncologynutritioninstitute.com. And so we've got a website, our newsletter, we send out different informational things. We have wonderful guest lectures from experts like yourself that we open to the public. We're also on Facebook and LinkedIn. And then the consulting, our group, we've got a fabulous group of gals who work with clients, and that's remissionnutrition.com. And we're on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and all that good stuff. So that's where we are with
Amazing.
newsletters and all that. So yeah.
Great.
And yeah.
Go.
Oh, and then the book, it's available on Amazon and Chelsea Green Publishing, both of my books. So yeah.
Definitely get a hold of them, everybody. So I'm really grateful for your time and being here today. And for anybody listening, if you've enjoyed this episode, please share it on your preferred social media platform. Or if you know a loved one that needs to begin their health journey or is in a chronic disease situation, share it with them. And hopefully this can be the door to the next chapter of their health journey in a really positive way. Because Jess is amazing and everything she does is awesome. Jess, from your journey, the final question I've got is, of all the amazing things you've learned, what is one piece of health information that you wish more people knew about?
Oh, what a good question. I think where I always sort of go back to is to think about water. So many where people are dehydrated. Their water sources are, from industrial water, have a lot of the nutrients taken out of them, a lot of minerals. I think that if we want to start like our base camp starting point with good nutrition is thinking about how you're hydrating your body because we're 80% water. Your brain is surrounded by water, so we're watery beings. So I think that the most important thing if I could start everybody off with just thinking about how they're hydrating in their water
Hmm.
source and water quality, that's it's simple stuff, but it's amazing how just switching up your water source can be so invigorating. I visited the a mistletoe factory, not factory, a mistletoe Helixor in Germany, and they have a this amazing structured waterfall that they use
Hmm.
to water all of their plant medicine. And it's just when you look at the different compositions of different water, of what it contains and the energy there, I think that that's yeah, hydrate. I think hydration is key.
I think that's amazing and perfect way to wrap this up because everybody drinks. Everybody can access water, right? So
Yeah,
getting the water piece right is fundamental.
yeah, yeah, that's
Well,
basic.
thank you so much for being here. You're absolutely coming back. There's no doubt
Okay,
about it.
thank you. I can't wait. I could chat with you all day. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having such a fun conversation.
Oh, you're more than welcome. But in the meantime, you know where to find us. And everybody listening, if you enjoyed this episode, there's a few other episodes I've referenced throughout this episode, so I will put it in the show notes below. All the links, all Jess's links will be down below. And that's a wrap from us. So thanks for being here, Jess, and we'll catch you
Thanks.
soon.
Thank you.